One of the simplest welding tests, I say simple, not necessarily easy, but simple, is to the AWS D9.1 code. That's a sheet metal code. So the test that I'm doing today is a vertical uphill 3G 11 gauge with a 1/16 gap. I was talking to Steve Bunyard of Reignite Hope. It's a nonprofit providing welding training for people that don't have hope. So the idea of me doing a video on this test came up, and I said would love to because I love the work that you guys are doing. Kind of a tricky little test, and as with any test, I've never done this before. I kind of had to dial it in, so I'm going to take you through that process of setting the machine. We'll talk about the things that I think make the most difference on passing this test. I got Steve from Reignite Hope to send me a few images. This is how they practice. They have the students take a piece like this. They call it the 5 fingers. They take a piece of 11 gauge steel and they put gaps in it with a saw blade. So the gaps are roughly 1/16 inch, and then the students get a lot of practice with a little bit of metal. I set up a piece kind of like that, just tacking several pieces together. I used a 1/16 filler rod to gap them with, and some of them are a little tight, some of them are a little loose on a 1/16 rod. For any test, there's a WPS. Here are the main points from the one they sent me. 17 to 19 volts, 70 to 85 amps using 035 wire and C25 gas. Before we get started with the arc shots and the welding, let's talk about a few things that I think make a lot of difference. Stick out and gun angle being two really important things, and of course, travel speed. I think aiming for a straight in 90-degree angle will be helpful. You could even aim for a slight pull, and that'll work too, but the tendency is going to be to lean the gun back too far to see the puddle. It's also the tendency is going to be to have too long of a stick out to see the puddle. Too long of a stick out is going to soften up that arc. You might want to use too long of a stick out when it's getting kind of hot with you and it looks like the puddle's getting out of control or the keyhole's getting out of control, but typically you don't want a long stick out. You want it fairly short. For this test, probably a 1/2 inch or less, just so you can see the puddle, see the leading edge of the puddle. You don't want it too close, but you don't want it way long like this. My gut feeling is I don't want any more than 17 volts, and I'm going to shoot for 150 inches a minute for the first weld with 035 wire, and we'll see how that does and go from there. This is a matter of kind of dialing in, getting the best results. And so the first weld, I'm just going to take a stab at it. At the beginning of this weld, it seems like I'm using a slight pull angle. That'll probably change as I get going. What I'm really trying to do is maintain that stick out and stay right on that leading edge of the puddle. Now if I slip or try to hold that arc too far at the leading edge, where I'm just basically in air, it'll shoot through wire, and they call that whiskers, and that's kind of a failure. So I'm trying to just kind of ride that ragged edge, close stick out on the front of that puddle. I'm not doing a whole lot of manipulation or a side-to-side motion at all, but it looks like I'm doing just a little bit. That's pretty normal. You're going to have a little bit of shake. Nobody's perfectly steady. Sometimes a very slight manipulation is necessary if your gap is just a little bit too wide or your settings are just a little bit too hot. But typically, you don't want to use a whole lot of side-to-side motion. Looks like I maintained a fairly even gun angle all the way up, just a slight pull. Let's check the backside, see if we got decent penetration. Looks like the penetration is fairly even from start to finish. Only problem is the front side looks a little ragged, a little humped up here and there, a little uneven, so I think we can do better. My gut feeling is I need to reduce the wire feed speed, but instead of doing that, at first I'm just going to bump it up a little bit and see if it gets better or worse, just as part of a little trial. This machine has inductance, which is a cool feature, but I'm setting it at 0 so that it's kind of like a machine that doesn't have that setting. We'll go over inductance a little bit more in future videos. I always like to take a few dry runs to make sure my glove's not going to get hung up or anything, where it feels steady and comfortable. My gun angle is roughly the same, but on this arc shot it looks like I'm actually using a little bit of a push. So it's hard to tell when your helmet's down. That's why I like to tell people to shoot for a straight in. You might be a little bit of a push or a little bit of a pull angle, but if you shoot for straight in, you won't get out of scope. This one seems to be welding okay. I'm just not sure it's any better. In fact, I think it's piling up just a little bit worse than the first one, but we'll see when we flip the helmet up, put the camera on the front and the back side. Same main things apply. I've got to have my settings pretty close, I've got to have my stick out right, and I've got to have my gun angle fairly close. So those are the three things that I think make most of the difference. And of course, travel speed. I've got to have my travel speed nice and even and maintaining that arc right on the leading edge of that puddle, not going up too far and shooting wire through the gap. Each of these welds take roughly a minute. That's about it. So, by the time you pull the trigger to the time you get to the end, there's just not much time. So you kind of need to have your settings pretty close. You kind of need to have it figured out what you're going to do. And I think the way to do that is weld the plate kind of like that 5-finger plate that I showed you at the beginning of the video. A lot of tests like this, in fact probably most, won't allow you to use a grinder to feather a restart or anything like that, so you don't want to stop. So the root pass went in very similar to the first weld, but let's look at the front of it and see that's got a lot more reinforcement than the first weld. Might be a little bit more uniform, but a little bit too much reinforcement. So I'm thinking I need to go down instead of up, so I'm going down to 144 inches a minute. I kept my voltage at 17. I'm just changing one thing at a time. I think 17 volts is going to do the trick. So this is 17 volts, 144 inches a minute, using 035 ER70S6 wire. Same basic technique as I ran doing the other two joints. Seems like it's going in there. We'll have to check it when we're finished. Here's the readout on the front of the machine as far as amperage goes. You can see I'm right in that sweet spot range of the amperage on the WPS. That's a good sign. I'm kind of wondering what you would do if you had to take this test and you didn't have an amperage readout to make sure you were within the scope of the WPS, but that's a topic for another video. You can see I'm staying right up in front of that puddle. It doesn't look like it's building up too much. I'm using just the slightest amount of wiggle. For me, that's mostly just to play the light around. I think it helps me see a little bit better, but I'm just using a very slight motion, nothing drastic. Sometimes it's probably dead straight in, but what I am trying to do is just really stay on that sweet spot, that front edge of the puddle, without going ahead too far and without hanging back in the puddle. That's the key. So this one is done. I think it went in just a little bit better, and there's a little bit more forgiveness with that lower wire feed speed. Penetration is consistent, start to finish. Looks pretty good. It's got a little bit of reinforcement on the back side. It's not sucked back at all. A little bit above flush. And the front side, definitely room for improvement, but it's better than the other two. 17 volts, 144 inches a minute. MIG settings are going to differ a little bit from one machine to another. I use a PrimeWeld MTS 200 for this, but I think these settings might be a good starting point for this test. I also think practicing on 10 or 11 gauge without a bevel is pretty darn good practice for an uphill open root on thicker plate like this 3/8 inch thick plate. This is a fairly common test. It's a 3/8 inch thick with 30-degree bevels, roughly an 1/8 of an inch gap. Just the slightest bit of land. You don't really have to have a land. I used a 1/16 land for this test, but you can see right here that the settings are not that different. 17 volts, 161 inches a minute. So just a little bit more wire feed speed will get you in the ballpark for an open root test on thicker plate. With a 1/8 inch gap, I tend to use a little bit of oscillation like this, but everything else holds true. Stick out, gun angle, travel speed, stay on the leading edge of the puddle. Hey, I hope you'll stick around a minute. I had the opportunity to interview Steve Bunyard, the founder of Reignite Hope. Here we go. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right. All right, this is Steve Bunyard here, the founder of Reignite Hope. Steve, welcome. Welcome to the last part of this video.
Yeah, thank you. Excited to be here. Honored to be here. Thank you. Thank you, Jody.
Would you let the listeners, the viewers know what is Reignite Hope?
Yeah, so Reignite Hope, we've been doing this for 14 years. We are a Christian welding ministry. We actually started up on Skid Row in Los Angeles, helping the homeless turn their lives around and get into a career. We outgrew a bunch of places. We keep growing. We're in Gardena, California right now, and we also do training now in multiple 18-wheelers that travel around, but we do it for free. Our name really describes what we do. We're dealing mostly with folks who have lost hope. Many of them are coming out of incarceration, coming out of gangs, trapped in poverty, and just don't know where they're going to go next. They hear about Reignite Hope somehow. We don't have to advertise it, and they walk in our door, and everything can change, and they can end up with a real career that'll bless them and their family forever. And so welding is what we do. I was a pastor all my life, retired from that recently, but during my time as a pastor, started Reignite Hope, my wife and I. I learned to weld when I was young, messed around with cars a lot, had a couple jobs where I TIG welded, mostly aluminum and mild steel. Never saw that turning into a ministry in any way, but now it is. And we will train and graduate over 300 students just in Southern California alone this year. They'll all be AWS certified. We also have training in Dallas and in Philadelphia, up in Sacramento, Northern California. We're also have been in the Philippines doing training. We're looking at possibly opening up training now in Cleveland, Lincoln's backyard, and also possibly opening up training again in another island in the Philippines. So again, we're helping those that are really on the margins of society that nobody else is helping, and they just need somebody to believe in them and give them an opportunity. And this really, really, really turns their life around.
I love that it is not just a handout. I love that
Yeah.
it's just not here's a card to go get yourself some food or whatever, because that nothing wrong with that, and that is needed and all that. But this is something that is so much more meaningful and impactful, that can really, not only just learning a skilled trade, but being mentored by people that can kind of mold and shape and have an influence on them, as
Yeah.
far as, hey, I care about you, I'm pouring myself into you. And I would imagine that has to touch some people,
Yeah, it sure does. I mean, we speak into their life every day. And as part of our faith, we open the Bible with them every day, really help them learn to make good choices in their life, really help them become great employees. On top of all of that, they have to work really hard. Our program is fast paced, and we do 120 hours of training. We get them basic entry level certs. They can go from knowing nothing about welding and being unemployed, and in 1 month be in SpaceX. And now with the 401k and medical and all of that, lots of other employers as well, but SpaceX is probably our number one pathway.
So this test that we did earlier in the video is a very simple test.
Yeah.
It kind of kicked my butt a little bit when I was filming it. And I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, because
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
almost over before it's done. You hit
Yeah.
the trigger, and you got things start happening, and you got to be on your toes, and you got to really hold right stick out, right arc length, and be in the right part of the puddle, and or it doesn't go right.
Yeah. Yeah.
What was the determining factor in you selecting that particular test?
Yeah. So for MIG, we teach also TIG and flux core and stick, but on MIG, that's under the D9.1 code, and it's like you said, it's a tricky little weld. We do a lot of other things with them in our MIG training, square tubing and 2Fs and all that kind of thing. But that one there is travel speed is really important. It really gets them to get locked in on watching that puddle and watching the penetration. And so it's really a great travel speed lesson for sure. Leading up to that, they've been padding beads and all of that kind of stuff before we get them on that plate. But yeah, we just think that's a really, really good test, and that'll give them some really good entry level skills. We don't pretend that we're turning out some kid that's been in a trade school for 2 years. That's not our goal. We try to touch as many lives as possible. That's why we've learned to kind of make this really microwaved and fast paced. Part of what helps us with that, Jody, is that our instructor to student ratio is crazy good. So we'll have a class of 30 students and we'll have maybe 8 instructors in there with 30 students. So they're getting lots and lots of shoulder to shoulder attention, which really helps them speed their skills up quite a bit, really helps that to work. And then because the demand is so high, so right now we are getting about 1,500 students a year applying for our program just in Southern California. We're going to graduate maybe 325 this year. That means we're turning away over 1,000 applicants a year. Wow. The need is that great. So we don't want to take 30 and spend 2 years with them or 1 year with them or even 6 months with them, because we do job placement. We want to get them certified, get them in job, and then take another 30 and just keep going and going. All of our trailers take 18 at a time. So we've got 3 18-wheelers that travel around as well. So today, when we had a full class at our brick and mortar, we also had, the 18-wheeler action going. And they'll do 18 at a time. Same thing, MIG and stick and TIG and all that in the 18-wheeler. Each student will graduate in a month with 2 certs. So we have them try all 4 processes, see which ones they like, because we want them to have a job they love. And then they get to pick 2. Their 2 favorites. And so they might get a MIG and a TIG or a stick and a flux core or whatever it might be on cert day. We got cert day coming up this Friday, October 4th. Had fun with them today. They're nervous. They're they're excited. All of that mixed into one, and they'll do great on cert day. We'll have an AWS inspector come in and do the testing. So it's a real deal cert. It's not Steve passing them. It's an unbiased inspector coming in, and they'll get a diploma from us as well, from Reignite Hope, which for many of them brings tears to their eyes because this is the first diploma they ever had in their life. Most of them were high school dropouts, got to the 9th or 10th grade, got in trouble, whatever, and never had a diploma, let alone a certification or anything in their life. Their moms are crying, their grandmothers are crying. I mean, it's an amazing thing that happens with that certification and that diploma. But long way to answer your question. We just thought that D9.1 cert there, 3G open root, full penetration was, a little tricky. And doing that, I think, gives them some skills that will carry them a long way.
Yeah, you mentioned you had plans for a facility in Cleveland or a trailer in Cleveland.
Yeah, Cleveland wants mobile, so they're in the process of trying to put a plan together for us to build them 2 trailers. We do all the build outs at Gardena in California here, so we buy the used 18-wheelers, build them out, wrap them, equip them, do everything on site. Cleveland is looking to have 2 trailers back there, maybe doing East Cleveland, West Cleveland, and then in between cohorts, maybe going to Pittsburgh, maybe going to Detroit. So with an 18-wheeler, all you need is a parking space. So we have our own power. We can go anywhere with them. And so that really creates a lot of advantage for our program. We can go where the need is. We don't have to get a building everywhere.
I've tested in those type of trailers before, years and years ago.
Yeah.
That's pretty common on a job site to test in a trailer like that.
Yeah.
Because same thing, but a lot of job sites, the job site is temporary. So they're going to build a permanent structure to test people. They're just all in a trailer that had 6 or 8 booths, and not very big booths, but big enough to test in, definitely.
Yeah.
But the Cleveland connection, see, I met you at a Fab Tech.
Yeah.
Years ago.
Vegas.
I meet a lot of people at Fab Tech, so I'm not sure, it stuck with me.
Yeah.
But then several months ago, I got a text from a friend from Cleveland. He was at another trade show, and he had a selfie with you and him, right? Said, "Hey, this guy says he knows you."
I know. Yeah.
So that prompted me to, oh yeah, okay. And he said he does this ministry called, or this nonprofit called Reignite Hope. I looked up Reignite Hope. I went on the contact form, filled it in. You emailed me back. And then when I did call you, when I did call you, you and one of your instructors apparently were having a conversation that very day about, I wonder if Jody would be willing to maybe do a video on this test that we give that would be sure be helpful for us to show our students that and everything. So if you believe in coincidence, which I really don't,
Yeah, no.
there's a lot of dots to connect there. So anyway, here we are, and I'm just tickled to have you on. I think the work that you're doing is amazing. I've looked at some of the testimonial type videos on Reignite Hope website, as
Yeah,
far as some people, just like you said, they're in tears. Their
yeah,
life is
yeah,
uh, they went from not having hope to having hope, basically. So
yeah. Amen. And yeah, you're a hero around our place. I mean, those 325 students will graduate this year. We'll all see Jody videos, weldingtipsandtricks.com. We introduce them as part of our curriculum. Literally, you need to be during the off hours watching videos there. I mean, your arc shots are amazing. You're a very gifted teacher. And yeah, you're a hero around the place. But yeah, Mike, one of our instructors, came up and just said, man, I wonder if Jody would ever do a video on us, and particularly this MIG test, because all our other tests, the TIG test, the stick, and the flux core, you have videos that cover those joints and those tests, but not that MIG one. And I said, well, no way I can make that happen, I told Mike. And then you call me up literally, hours after that, maybe not even an hour after that. And I couldn't believe it. I went and told the rest of the team, and they were jumping up and down. And even today, I told them I'm getting interviewed by you tonight, and they're all excited. And no,
well,
you're a tremendous blessing to the welding community. You know that. You don't need me to tell you that.
thank
But
you. Thank you.
yeah, your ability to just really explain things in a down to earth way, and again, amazing photography. Yeah, we've been watching you for years.
Well, I hope that I can help some more. I have a new thing called Welder Skills.
Yep.
It is a membership platform, private video platform. I feel like there's a way that Welder Skills can work with Reignite Hope, and I'd love to talk more about that in the future. Maybe we can provide some scholarships or something like that to
Yeah.
help, because there's a handful of videos that are sticking points for you guys that would, here's what I remember when I was an instructor. All right, let me give this demo. 3 or 4 students are huddled around.
Yep.
2 of them are bumping my helmet with their helmet and trying to get in there close enough to see. It's kind of tough.
Yeah.
So to be able to have a video with kind of the puddle magnified a little bit is helpful, I think.
Oh
And
yeah.
so, yeah,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
be happy to do that. So we'll talk. We'll talk. So if someone wants to learn more or support Reignite Hope, how would they do that?
Reignitehope.com. So just go to our website there, and you'll find lots of information there. If you want to support, there's a button there you can click on for that. But we'd love to do whatever we can to tell you all the exciting things that God is doing through this program and in the lives of our students. And yeah, we're very volunteer based. So there's about 40 volunteers here in Southern California that surround our program and do math tutoring, resume writing. We've got a whole lunch program that goes on. Some of our kids don't eat a lot of food, so lunch is important to them. And then when I speak at local churches, I tell them, if you want to learn to weld and you're willing to volunteer as a coach at Reignite Hope, we'll teach you. And we have a dentist that's one of our volunteer welding coaches. We've got a pharmacist. We've got an attorney. I mean, all these folks that just want to help people. And we've taught them how to weld, and then they volunteer as welding coaches. So some of it's paid staff, but a lot of it is volunteers. And so love to have them visit the website and be encouraged. It's not all bad news out there. There's a lot of good news on reignitehope.com.
I agree. Steve, it's been a pleasure
Yep.
having you on, and I'll get that video. People will see this very soon. God bless you. God bless Reignite Hope, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you, Jody. This has been an honor. Keep up the great work.